Hey Paul, I have a question for you from somebody who's been listening to some of your TikToks.
Okay.
They want to know how you got started writing.
Okay, that's some more complicated answer. I've always wanted to be a writer, and for a long time I would start writing things, and then it would just peter out. Like I've even got chapters and chapters of books done, and then they just didn't go anywhere. And it wasn't until I really started planning out and outlining ahead of time that everything kind of fell into place.
When you say fell into place, can you expand upon that?
So most of the stories take place in a world I created for a long-running role-playing game. That's a tabletop role-playing game that I ran for quite a few years. And I took inspiration from that. I've been running games since I was, I think I was 12 or 13 when I first started running games. And now I'm 60 plus.
And how long had you wanted to write a book for?
Forever, I think. It was always kind of on the back burner. I used to love the creative process. I still do. Love the creative process, creating worlds, creating scenarios in which people could interact. That's why I like running role-playing games so much. And this let me take it one step further. When you're running a role-playing game, you're creating a world, but it's up to the players to create the story. But when you're writing a book, you get to create the story. So in a sense, you're playing in your own world.
And do you find that your players, the characters that you create, are just as
problematic as players, real life people?
Yeah, I was going to say adventure seeking.
So I'll have an outline. Admittedly, when you're writing the first book in a series, it's a little tougher because although you have an idea what the character's like, they don't really come alive until you start writing them. And then, based on their experience, they tend to develop their own personalities. I'm not saying they take over, but if you have a fully developed character, you rationalize what the character does and how they react to certain situations, and that will determine, to a large extent, how the story progresses.
But I've seen you as you're writing, and sometimes you'll be writing and then you will say, well, that just changed the whole story.
Yeah, that happens too. Sometimes, what happens a lot is I'll introduce a secondary character who's maybe not meant to be in it long term, but they're just such an interesting character to write that I just feel like I'm compelled to include them. I've had a couple characters that were meant to literally die off or be killed or whatever. I enjoyed writing them, so I kept them in.
And what advice would you give someone who's kind of struggling to start a story? They have these concepts in their head, but to take it from their head to paper, they just don't know how to do that. What would you suggest?
So first of all, there are two main ways to write a story. I'm not saying one way is better than the other. There's what's called writing by the seat of your pants. You make it up as you go. And then there's plotters like I am. Some people plot more than others. Some have just a basic outline. Some have a very detailed outline. You have to find what works for you. I would suggest if you're having trouble getting the ideas down, to just list things out in point form. Even something like if you imagine Lord of the Rings in point form, a bunch of hobbits get together, they travel to Rivendell.
Yeah.
Something in Rivendell happens. Maybe you don't know what happens there, but you want them to continue on their journey. So I use bulleted items in a Word document or any kind of word processor. Just do it like that. And the nice thing about on a computer, of course, is you can insert lines, move lines about. Some people write ideas down on index cards, and then they can swap them around. Sometimes I've had ideas for books that just start as a single scene and grow from that. I just have this concept of something happening. When I started The Frozen Flame, the only thing I really had in the beginning was these two character ideas, Athgar and Natalia, and just the idea of them, their magic is the polar opposite. One's fire magic, one's water magic. Just the idea of them working together under unusual circumstances, that was what sort of germinated into the whole Frozen Flame series, which will eventually be 8 books.
So from basically 2 characters, one being a fire mage and one being a water mage, to 8 books.
To 8 books, yes. And lots of other secondary characters, including families. Don't be afraid to have your characters grow, not just in a personal way, but in terms of their family and their relationships as well. One of the things I don't like about series that continue on is when they just have one character throughout the whole thing. People grow, they learn, they make friends.